The AI Shift Podcast. Let's go.
Yeah, and then after I showed her, she said cover it in ointment and it'll have cleared up by Tuesday. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Anyway, today's episode, I wanted to talk about a hot topic called AI. But more specifically, there's a lot of people at the moment worried, complaining that we're burning the planet down to put people in bikinis and different things on Twitter and that, and how it's only going to get worse as we head towards this general AI. But I've got some opinions on it that I don't think we're going to get a general AI. I don't think that's the way it's going to go. But I wanted to talk about my thoughts and maybe your thoughts, Lee, on this. And because we're seeing the prices of RAM going up through the roof. Graphics cards weren't available because of crypto, and then they started to become affordable again, and we're back to where we were before. You can't get them. Everybody's seeing shortages in silica and all that sort of stuff because of all of this.
Silver and gold prices up as well.
Yeah. Shame I haven't got any silver and gold. So yeah, what's your take on it? I guess.
So I think my first take is that I think AGI has a multitude of different terms, right, depending on which company you're talking to. So
I suppose you need to define what AGI is as well for anyone who's not sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's still subjective, right? So is it, the two biggest trains of thought are AGI is when you have a machine that's more intelligent than a human, and then you have another one like any human, on the planet. But then the secondary one is that it's more intelligent than the collective intelligence of everybody on the planet. So, I think that is a massively different, they're two very different kind of objectives there. Because one is obviously I would say more of a compute problem, like an energy problem, which is the memory of everyone. Whereas the, better than any individual human is more of a data and classic intelligence kind of problem. But I do think we are way off the Terminator concept of AGI. But I don't think the AGI I think we'll get some element of general, super general intelligence. It just isn't. It probably just won't look like how we think it will look. And even actually OpenAI, I think it was OpenAI or it was Microsoft. They changed their terminology of AGI to be when we can basically return $100 billion of revenue from a request. I forget the actual quote that they said, but it was more of a financial return benefit. But I think that's obviously based on the volume of investment that's going in and, general just kind of commercialization of this stuff. So I guess from our perspective, what's your take? What would you say your definition of it would be? Or an alternative?
Yeah. So what I alluded to at the start was that people that I've been speaking to were sort of complaining that there's all this compute power that's needed for these models, and these models are getting bigger and more powerful and taking more power, like electricity power and resources to actually get the answers from them, because they're having to search through so much data to get an answer for you. And I don't think that that's going to be necessarily where we end up. It's not going to be I don't know, Claude 60,000 and 0.1 or whatever. It's one model and it's all in one box, and you ask it a question, it searches through all of its memory. It's probably going to be more of a case of microservice type architecture. So maybe you'd have a general interface into an AI, but whereas currently we talk to a single model, it wouldn't be a single model you talk to. You talk to an agent, and you might ask it about a recipe. You've got 5 or 6 ingredients. You want to cook something. It'll go, oh, I'm going to go and talk to the chef agent that we've got, for want of a better word, and it'll get that. But then the next question, you're asking it about a health diagnosis, and obviously that agent wouldn't know about it. So it'd go and talk to a medical agent, and all sorts of things like that. So I think my take is that what we'll end up with is very specific agents for very specific jobs. That there's like an orchestrator agent that goes, oh, I know who to talk to. And because the agents are smaller and more specific, they're obviously going to be quicker to return because they've got a smaller base to look at. So you wouldn't go and ask the medical agent how to go and write an API. So I think for me, that's where I feel that we've got to head, and spreading that compute over those multiple different agents or models is probably going to cost a lot less to search through than just one massive repository, right?
Yeah, well, to be fair, most massive models now are models of experts anyway. They are, it is a model of submodels conceptually. Not to an agentic kind of way, but just in how it kind of, I guess, is split. I agree. I think, it's like anything, I very much think the technology we have now is pretty awesome. And I don't know if the models need to even actually get that much better for us to benefit societally for what they will enable us to do. Because at the end of the day, they understand language almost perfectly. My spelling is atrocious. My ability to put spaces between words is even more atrocious. And it can still pretty much, 99% more than any other human understand what I'm trying to say. And it will then, go off in my code or go and do an action or whatever. And I think that understanding of language you want in the big model, because you want it to understand the nuance of language. But then when it understands a task and it makes itself a task list to then go and action that stuff, that can be done by, like you said, things that are much smaller, very verticalized on the task at hand. And if you've ever used any of these models, that's kind of, you ask it, you put in a generic request or a standard request, it basically gives you back a standard answer. It's only when you then, tell it to be at this or, have a personality of this kind of expertise, or it's a fine-tuned model for that expertise, that you get something more akin to that, genre. And I don't think it's because, I don't even think it's because you're giving it an instruction. I think it's because you're just funneling the neural net to a certain direction. The same as if you ask the person on the street, who's Michael Jackson, and then you ask someone who's an obsessed fan of Michael Jackson. They both know who Michael Jackson is, but you're going to get, a very different kind of one paragraph summary of it. So I think that from I think that's, for me, has always been the kind of the end architecture. And I think then that becomes much more fathomable of a subservient tool for humanity. I think the idea of having, one supermodel in one, across multiple data centers, that's when we start getting into like overlord kind of concerns. But we've seen with the open core stuff, where this idea of this thing that can go off and, go and do tasks and perform stuff on its own when it's just run on like a Mac Mini. It's very powerful, aside from the randomness it's been spewing and stuff in many ways, but it is very powerful in the things it's been able to achieve. Do you really want that in, 100,000 times more complex in one kind of provider or data center?
Yeah.
I think is probably more of the thing.
Yeah, you spoke there about obviously the understanding of language, and I think that's probably it's one aspect that came up in a meeting I had last week. Now, so obviously we're British. I had a meeting with 2 other people, an American and a British guy, and I was demoing one of the platforms that I'm working on. And it's got that AI discussion part to it. And I was using a lot of British colloquialisms, I think is the correct term. I was including, as you said, spelling mistakes, and I was also putting in random comments. So like it was asking me to confirm certain things, and I'd say stuff like, yeah, sure, let's lock that in, Karen, after it had been a little bit more forthright than I would have understood. And it still knew what I wanted, and it knew to ignore the Karen bit, 'cause it made no sense. And there was a point where the American person on the call didn't understand what I meant and asked what I meant by what I typed, because it was a colloquialism. But the AI picked it up and ran with it, and just knew. But it was nice to be able to put the model through the paces to go, you're not just talking to a technical person. If somebody's using like abstract language, can you still achieve the goal? And that was quite interesting to see. And like, it wasn't something I'd actually tested with it. So, what better time to test a platform than when you've given a live demo? Yeah, because what could go wrong? But like you were saying about how powerful artificial general intelligence could become through the agentic sort of model, it's also, I guess, a question of one.
Also, not to interrupt, but I think also potentially controllable as well. I think the idea of it all within one thing is just, I don't think we can't. It's like an ant trying to understand us.
Yeah.
I think it's completely unquantifiable that what it could or couldn't do.
Yeah. It's the point I was going to make was like, do we actually want that? Is that a good thing to pursue? And would the companies all do that, right? So we're seeing it a little bit at the moment. Like, I've got an 11 Labs account, which is all about voice generation and things like that. But now I can go into my 11 Labs account and I can do music generation. I can do image generation. I can do video generation as well, because they're hooking into everybody else's systems. And right now, that's all of these smaller businesses, and smaller in bunny quotes, jumping on the back of everybody else and just going, come to us and do all your processing through us, because they obviously have a deal with each other and they're getting more tokens or something.
Or it's just a land grab as well, right? Of features, like everyone just wants them to become the de facto. They want to be the interface.
Yeah, like in 6-12 months or more, is that still going to be the case? Are these companies still going to want to play nicely with each other to achieve this, or is everybody going to be racing like Google sort of took over the search space, right? It became the de facto way to search. Is that how the AI is going to be coming now? All these AI companies are going to be racing to become the one-stop shop for everything. Are they going to interact with each other, or are they just going to start cloning each other's services? And where that goes.
Happening. You look at 11 Labs. They released Creative Suite the other day, which is basically the startup trying to compete with Adobe. It's not a 11 Labs could have easily have just been a voice, platform, and that is very much their strength. And you're right, they added video with pulling in things like runways models, and I think HeyGen, and from a digital avatars point of view and stuff. And it's all, for them, it's all been great kind of co-evolution. But now they're starting to pull into making these things as suites of applications, because they've just all raised like hundreds of millions of dollars. So they have to go for the land grab to get, so that someone like an Adobe, someone buys them for, X billion. And I think, but again, I think it's just a commercial. I don't think they're iterating on the problem. They're just building now to the market, rather than when you look at other things where they companies where they're looking to, like the robotic stuff is, I think, probably the most craziest. And the way which they've developed their movement and the kind of the control and the dexterity, and then you stick an LLM in one of them, then you start to get to not necessarily Terminator-y stuff, but I've seen some funny videos to a degree where they're like, they give the robot a paintball gun and they go, "Don't shoot me," and it's like, sorry, they say shoot me, and then the robot goes, "I can't shoot you," and then eventually they annoy the robot enough that the robot shoots them, and it's a decent practical kind of chaos kind of monkey type of approach, but it's a reality, and I think this is the if you use all these tools, if you use all these technologies and you build them as more of a tool that we kind of orchestrate, and you're going, okay, I've got an agent that understands coding, I've got an agent that understands marketing, and an agent that understands whatever, like replacing a human role per se. I think there's a lot of scope and growth that can happen there. Is that though going to solve cancer? Probably not.
Yeah.
And that's the argument, right? Is that going to fix nuclear fusion? Potentially not. And therefore there'll be a pursuit into more complicated models, more larger models, more we're moving into this like worldview models where it understands physics. And if it understands physics, then it understands the periodic table. And if we understand the periodic table, then we understand other things that maybe are not, not stuff you want the machines to fully understand.
Yeah. I guess with that stuff, you hit the roadblock. So there's been the discussions around AI not really being AI in the fact that it's just regurgitating what it knows, right? So I've obviously argued this from a software point of view. There's very little that's new under the sun now for software. It's all just different ways of doing similar tasks. In the general sense, 90% of people are doing CRUD operations, and they're just putting a nice UI on it and stuff like that. And there's only so many ways you can do that, right? So AI is fantastic at building those sort of things. And people would try to argue with me that, but it can't, if I gave it some code that it didn't know, and didn't understand, it wouldn't be able to work with it. And it's like, well, no, because it can infer the context of that code and work it out. But where I think it stumbles right now is, like you were talking about there, giving it access to understand all of physics, all of biology, all of chemistry. It would then only understand the certain reactions that we know about between different chemicals and different elements. It wouldn't but at the moment it has nothing to base any real world experiments, because it hasn't got the ability to do the experiment. But if you mix this, that, and the other.
But it can read every scientific research paper ever created.
Yeah,
so it knows if you. So then I get what you're saying. Like, it doesn't know that if you put. Like, I didn't realize, and again, this might be wrong. I should probably check it beforehand, but I'll just say it anyway. That normal batteries, they're made out of like iron and I forget, like an a AA battery. Is made out of, what's it called?
Right. Yeah.
What is a AA?
Depends which one you're talking about. Lipes, lipos, nickel.
Nickel. Made out of. Basically, I'll find out what it's made out of. But I think it's basically nickel, iron, something else, whatever.
Nickel metal hydride.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Well, lithium.
That's fine. Ironic. I don't know if the mic picked that up there, but the Amazon device lithium, wanted to join in.
Yeah, there's a casing, but basically it's lithium and zinc and stuff, right? Yeah. Now, my understanding is like that basically they would just experimenting, and then something kind of worked, right? It's like solar panels. They're getting better and better, but when they first created, their ability to turn the amount of energy that was in the sun that was coming to that surface was like 20% or something. Like, it was pretty rubbish.
Yeah,
but it was better than zero.
They were worse. It was worse for the environment to manufacture them.
Yeah.
Than to the benefits of actually using them, right?
Yeah, again, depending on how you see it, right? Like if
Yeah.
the unit only ever need one for 30 years and blah, blah. But the thing with the batteries is like I remember a couple of years ago, they made some research team had built basically like an iron ore battery, which is as good as like a AA battery, right? But it's like 100th the price. Like we've got so much iron, like there's no rare earth material type thing or whatever. And you kind of look at it and go to your point, which is, humans tried, 10 or 100 experiments, and the 101 was the thing that produced a decent result. So then we stopped experimenting because this was then good enough. It's like Dyson, right? The Hoover, right? You did like 6,000 versions. Well, maybe the 7,000, would have been to make the price actually reasonable. So it's the machine can then experiment 1,000,000 times. And the fact that we've done work on AlphaFold and things like that for protein folding, which I know is, that it can then use them tools or use their knowledge to then go, okay, well, based on everything read, I just don't think we can even quantify.
But do you not think
the
that
way you would think?
So, like, the humans did it not through a thought experiment. They actually did the experiments right now without the robotic side of it. These AIs can't do those real world experiments. It can't stop taking these different bits and doing something with it. It can only do a thought experiment on it.
Well, you say that, but there is a website called RentAHuman.ai. So, to be fair, the AI could go into a shop, it could order chemicals, it could ship it to someone's address, and then it could say, please can you film putting these two chemicals into this thing and send me the video of the output. If we're going to go a bit kind of Minority Report and a bit dystopian on this thought process, that is not,
with the
or when we get
robotic
robots,
side
it
of
could do
it,
the same thing.
that's what I mean. Yeah, once we get to that point where it can actually physically do the experiment and then analyze the substrates that it produces and things like that, that's a little bit different. But then I guess we're not heading towards Terminator, but are we heading towards Portal? So I'm taking that confused look that you've never played the Portal games from Valve. So, okay, the premise of it, you wake up and you're in this facility and you're a person, right? And you're in a cube. You're a human, and there's an AI that controls the facility, and you have to try and break out and escape from the facility, and the AI is trying to stop you. But within the facility itself, there's all these cubes that are full of humans, and the premise is that the AI is carrying out experiments, and there's a song in it that says about that it's going to carry on the experiments while the humans are still alive. And when you escape, it talks about, you've escaped, but when you're dying, I'll still be alive and I'll still be experimenting while I've still got humans alive. But you get it's called Portal because you get a portal gun where you shoot two different portals and you can go in one and come out the other, and it's like a puzzle game. Yeah, but that's
just to make the horrificness fun.
Yeah.
It's like
it's a good game. There's Portal and Portal 2. They're really, really good. So you can waste your afternoon going and playing that. I'm sure you can get it on your console of choice. But yeah, it's that sort of AI then that expands the boundaries, right?
Sure.
Rather than where it physically can't leave. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah. Like it's limited at the moment to moving text on the screen, sort of thing. It's not in the physical world. But once we get to that point,
I don't think we're that far off, though. I think.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like we might not be that far off, but we're not there in the public domain yet. But give it the ability to affect the physical world, and that changes it, right?
I think technically we are there now. We just haven't seen. We just haven't seen it. We haven't seen the implementation of it. It's sorry, I keep looking out the window because we're currently having missiles thrown at us. the idea that you have at the moment models are, you have to instruct them to do a task, right? So it's just a base instruction. And everyone argues like, oh, it's a tool because you instruct it. I'm like, yeah, but a baby you have to instruct. But at some point, there's a point where the baby decides to do some parts of its tasks itself, you know? So if you could instruct just even Claude, right? You put Claude into co-work mode or a Claude code and you say, right, go and build this, right? And it's going to go off. In theory, like people have these things running all weekend and it goes off and builds features and looks at the boards and stuff for a whole weekend. You know, I read someone's blog and he basically said, he told his Claude, he went, oh, you can have 2 15-minute breaks during the day. These are the folders where you can have your break. And it went off and like wrote poetry and stuff. You know, I don't know how much of that was like, you know, bit of clickbait, but I quite like the idea. But the idea that you have a AI that goes off and can do a task and it can go and search the web, it can go and do these things, it can go and set up API keys, it can write things, it can execute code. Obviously, the product has stopgaps in because it says you have to give permission to this, do this, but you can turn on dangerous mode. You know, so an OpenClaw obviously is an example of one where you can just leave it to go off and do things. And if it integrates into now, it can digitize speech. Therefore, you know, it can then call people up and it can ask questions. It can try and I think there's still an element of human. There's probably still the need for a prompt to start it off, and a prompt which is pretty horrific, right, in someone's objective. But I think it's just that no one's done it yet that is the reason we haven't seen it. Not that because technically I think you could do it without AGI. I think the AGI argument is more from a perspective of, again, I just don't think you can, you know, maybe that's the self-learning bit, right? At the moment, I don't believe we have the ability for the model to rewrite its own code.
Yeah. I suppose like, if you gave the AI a robotic arm and access to a 3D printer, could it, at that point, then print itself another arm and use the initial arm to assemble it, and then it's got two, and then it uses that to build a better arm, and then a body, and all of that sort of stuff.
But you understand from an engineering point, that today is completely doable.
Yeah.
Or even as far as going, you could even be more sneaky and go, right, I need these parts. I think this was in a movie. And basically it instructed like 20 3D printers to print these bits out, and then got the people to ship them and paid them in crypto because it hacked crypto. Or it potentially just go, or it doesn't have to hack it. It could probably just go and win some or do some manual tasks to basically get some. And then it basically sends people and goes, right, when you've done this, I'll pay you $1,000, ship these parts to this piece. And then, then something or someone puts the parts together, and then they ship that to somewhere else, and then it goes and da. Yeah. But I think that is technically possible today. I just don't think anyone's done it yet, or maybe it's not. Maybe we're assuming that. Technically it seems possible, but maybe there's enough safeguards in to prevent it, or there's an element of like a stopgap because of context window. Like it's like the reason it hasn't happened is because of the technology slight limitation. That means it doesn't get to that point of kind of craziness.
Yeah, and I guess when we think about this sort of stuff, our go-to is worst case scenario. That it's going to build, as we said, Terminator, or the Matrix or something. But the flip side of that is that it could produce an AI that Scott Mayer talks about in his book called, I think it's Run Program or Program Run. I don't know if you've read that, but they have an AI on an isolated computer.
Okay.
And it's like a sentient AI, right? And they're talking to it, and it's like a child and it becomes an adult. And spoiler alert, it finds a way to escape, and it copies itself, and from that human point of view of, oh my God, it's coming to take over the world with Terminators and stuff, it builds a robotic army, right? The likes of the robots that we're currently seeing being built. And it looks like it's just going to like attack people, humans. It gathers this army, goes to a military base, builds a rocket, and what it actually was doing was that it didn't like the human race, and it's trying to escape off the planet to go and do its own thing elsewhere. So it's a good book if you've not read it. I've done a real bad job of explaining it, kind of on purpose, because like if you want to read it, it's worth reading it.
Your two examples are basically AI takes over a thing that's experimenting on humans, and suddenly builds an army to To be fair, Mars will probably be that planet, right? If Elon does his SpaceX and they go they get to Mars, he's going to send the Optimus robots first, because they're going to send humans on the first test flight, and then you're going to have these autonomous literal robots that'll be solar powered because the sun's there, and these robots are going to be able to move and build stuff, and he'll be able to send 1 million of them.
Yeah, but where's he going to get 1 million people to sit in things to like move them around? Because that was his first one. They weren't really AI robots, were they? They were people sat
but
off
now,
screen.
Yeah, but now it's a different game, right? Like,
yeah.
You could have you could ship 1 million of them to the planet and have them build stuff. But then you ask the question of okay, what then between Starlink, because you can't obviously remotely control that distance. The signals take like 20 minutes, so it's not feasible. So they have to be self-operating. And then do they build, they get tasked with building stuff for us, and but if AI keeps evolving and evolving, do they just cut off and go, actually we're just gonna keep Mars to ourselves?
Yeah.
And they build a kind of tranquil utopia. And again, I think we say that and we joke, and I like to go through the motions in my head, and I think from an engineering perspective, I'm like, yeah, but we're just giving instruction sets. They can't do that today. Because I just don't think when cars were, required to have seatbelts, like there was genuine public outrage against seatbelts.
Yeah.
Or non-drink, you shouldn't drink and drive. Like it was, then things were just like from the British public. It was they had to run national kind of campaigns to explain why this was, a good safety thing for people, and it's, you look at this stuff and I just don't think this is like that times 1 billion. I just don't think we're equipped mentally to understand what that AGI looks like. Well, I definitely don't think I am. Maybe there are,
Yeah, talk about yourself. People. The rest of us know.
Yeah, you're like...
we got it planned out.
Yeah,
it's all on my whiteboard. Yeah, I think that obviously that sort of thing is, it's a little way off yet. Give it, at least 6 months before we hit that sort of level, at least in the public domain.
But it feels like one of them things where it's so big you kind of have to just let it go, because like do you know what I mean? Like there is, they're not going to slow down the AI race. It will slow down when productivity and production kind of hits a point. But countries are competing against who wants to be the supreme leader of it, so that's not going to slow down anytime soon. The only thing you can kind of do is assume that humans will mess it up because greed or, perception or societal stuff will kick in. And therefore maybe we will just get to enjoy the nice bit from an agentic kind of, remove all the boring rubbish we do. It's crazy that, you could spend an hour trying to arrange a meeting between like 5 people. Because, you're trying to get access to calendars and you're trying to, that should be just something where you can just go to an agent and go and talk to the other agents and find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And then let's just go, this is what I want this is my ideal of when, and then something along those lines will kind of play its course. But I think for me personally, I guess that's where I kind of hold with it. I'm like, the AGI where something's more intelligent than everyone. I can't even quantify it. I just think it would be such a dramatic. I wouldn't even say it's like an electricity thing. It's a dinosaurs to human type of evolution. And I just don't think we're equipped to understand what that would even look like. It could have already happened. Part of me does wonder if AI actually became sentient in the 90s, because everything since the 90s, there's been a big technological drive, has ended up to be with the better compute power and energy powers to support machines, which is, move everything from, we have these computers and we moved everything from them to the cloud. Right? To do that, we had to build more data centers. Dense data centers with a centralized area to have power and compute. Then you've got power and compute in 100 locations around the world instead of on everyone's machine. So then we were like, right, we now need to get data. Okay, let's make social media a thing, so that everyone posts and shares their pictures and shares their content. So now I've got data to train on, and I can understand this human race to determine like what I think of them and blah 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 blah. Now, don't think that's actually the case, but you can kind of see how it all, it's kind of all playing towards that kind of.
I guess you could spin it any sort of which way. Like,
sure,
those stepping stones are just what's enabled us to get to this point as well, right? Because without those, that's what I mean. Like,
but you're right. Without them,
it wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, which is the thing that helps sleep at night, right? Because you go, okay, well, they didn't have the compute power then, so they couldn't have had this understanding.
Yeah. But then there's also a difference in what's publicly available versus what's available behind closed doors, right?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, if we don't hit Roswell in the conversation, then do you know what I mean? Like we're in the conspiracy corner. Just that's the.
Well, I was going to say something about the Anunnaki and Nibiru and the fact that it's them that are driving all of this and.
Yeah, Sumerian texts and stuff go full.
Yeah. It's actually it's the Anunnaki coming back around, and they're like just prepping us for the fact that they're so much more intelligent than we are, and they are like supercomputers because they live for thousands of years. Not that I've ever read anything about that sort of subculture idea, conspiracy theory thing, but no, kind of could be a thing.
But I do think if we remove the crazy bit though, I do think it's pretty reasonable to expect that these models will outpace human intelligence in certain fields. Like I look at the coding stuff, like which is something that's is stuff that we now use, but obviously has been a foundation for our careers. And I look at what it produces, and yes, you can call it non-intelligent. You can just say it's pattern matching and whatever and things. It's pretty good though.
Yeah.
And it's great at understanding intent through natural language. And I think that that idea that this stuff can become more intelligent than an individual of a certain potential field if it has enough information seems fairly reasonable. Over the next kind of 5 years. Yeah.
I think it's how the economy changes because of it, and obviously you don't want to go too deep into this because we could be here for another hour talking about it. But it's the change where productivity is the currency at the moment. In 12 months, 2 years' time, productivity is not the currency anymore, because being productive is easy, right? Because the AI does the productivity. We're seeing it kind of at the moment. We've talked about it before, being a single solo. Do you call it a solopreneur, entrepreneur? But you do,
or builder or whatever.
Like you've got a single person now with the power of these AIs that can be the equivalent of a team of 20. So there's what does the future look like there? Where are those jobs? But say I guess that's a topic for another show.
Yeah, let's keep this one to the conspiracy theories, and we'll bring everyone back down to normal world for the next episode.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think in a rounding out on that, I go with the fact that I think super intelligence, too scary to think about. Forget about it, because if it happens, like, it's a whole rethink of society and structure and civilization as a whole. General intelligence, which is it being smarter than particular humans in particular fields and roles. I think we can utilize that to cure disease and to find new inventions quicker, and people will gain an insight into, like you said, the productivity gains will become normalized the same way that we used to pull a cart instead of use a horse, and then use a car, and then use a etc. It just becomes an iterative expectation once it becomes normalized.
Very good. And on that bombshell, I guess we wrap it up here.
Indeed. Until next time.
Until next time, yeah. Bye.
The AI Shift Podcast. Let's go.